The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and you look great up there. Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, my friend, Mr. Hastings, for such, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
House Resolution 73 provides for a closed rule for consideration of HRES 72. It provides 9.5 hours of debate divided by the committees outlined in HRES 72 and provides the minority a motion to recommit with or without instructions. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. The legislation is simple, direct, and easy to understand. The text of the 3-page bill was posted last week on the Rules Committee website. This legislation is an attempt and an effort to provide more transparency and accountability in the government regulatory process, something that my colleagues and I have called for numerous times in the last 2 Congress. The legislation before us today calls for 10 House committees to review existing, pending, and proposed regulatory orders, federal government, particularly with respect to their effects on destroying jobs and economic growth. With the current high unemployment rate, it is essential that we do everything reasonably possible that we can to look at and to reduce government rules and regulations that impede job creation, economic growth, that discourage innovation, hurt or harm global competitiveness, limit credit, create economic uncertainty, impose unnecessary paperwork and cost on small businesses, and that results in large-scale and often unnecessary unfunded mandate on employers. And that is exactly what this legislation would do. And we're on the floor today to talk about this as an important component of allowing America to get back to work and to highlight these rules and regulations that stifle not only investment but also job creation. Every single member of Congress understands and believes that regulations are needed to provide the rules, safety, and structures for this society to function properly. While regulations are important, they can also cross that fine line and become too burdensome. It is essential to strike a balance to ensure that the imposed rules and regulations do not lead to higher cost and less productive societies. The federal government creates an average of 4,000 final regulations each year, with about 500 to 700 that are reviewed by the White House. According to a recent report from the Small Business Administration, the total cost of federal regulations has increased to $1 trillion, $750 billion a year to the U.S. economy. $1,750 billion is what this burden is on the free enterprise system. Additionally, the study shows that regulatory and paperwork costs were found to be more onerous for smaller firms than their larger counterparts. More specifically, the cost of regulation per employee for firms with fewer than 20 employees is now $10,585, a 36% difference between costs incurred per employee by a larger firm. This is absolutely outrageous. This is outrageous because small business is the backbone and the energy of our economy. It represents 99.7% of all employers. Small businesses, according to the Small Business Administration, have generated 64% of net new jobs over the past 15 years, while employing over half of all private sector employees. One of the fastest ways to put America back to work, Republicans believe, is to limit the regulatory expenses that these small firms have to comply with simply to satisfy federal government regulations. Regulatory burdens are hindering job growth. Regulatory burdens are hindering investment and innovation while eroding some of the most basic and fundamental freedoms in America. Congress and this administration must work together to do more than prevent harmful new regulations. They must also review, study, and eliminate unnecessary rules that are already on the books. On January 18th of last month, President Obama signed an executive order to provide a government-wide review of the rules already on the books to remove outdated regulations. In an op-ed placed in the Wall Street Journal last month by the President, he clearly states that, and I quote, "Sometimes these rules have gotten out of balance, placing unrealistic burdens on business, burdens that have stifled innovation and that have a chilling effect upon growth and jobs," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, I applaud and I appreciate the President for recognizing this. And I ask my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to understand what we are attempting to do today. And that is to support as best as we can not only the ideals that the President talked about, but also a focus on these rules and regulations that stifle innovativeness, create cost, and ruin jobs in America. Mr. Speaker, while the President is now taking a step in the right direction when it comes to regulation, in the last fiscal year alone, the Obama administration unleashed 43 major new regulations that will cost America more than new $28 billion annually. These costs will affect Americans in many ways, from raising the price of cars, where we buy food, where we eat, and every single one of these stands in the way of making the free enterprise system more efficient and somehow does not help in creation of jobs. The President will have to take a step back from some of the major bills that he signed last year, and I believe he can do that. By employing the ideas that he had in this op-ed, he can do something about it, and that is join Republicans who today are attempting to work with the President. If the President's serious about reducing regulatory burdens impacting every American, we can do this job together. 15 of the 42 regulations proposed last year were from the Frank Dodd financial regulatory bill. Another 5 stem from the Obamacare bill, and 10 others come from the Environmental Protection Agency, or what is known as the EPA, including the first mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions. The annual compliance costs constitute only a part of the economic burden of regulations on business. Many of these new rules curtail the purchase of new equipment, conversions of industrial practices, and are about revising data collection and reporting procedures. One example is the new restriction on short sales from the Frank Dodd bill that requires the Security Exchange Commission to make modifications to computer systems and surveillance mechanism for gathering and managing this information that will cost over $1 billion. Mr. Speaker, that defies balance and, I think, ultimate accountability of what the regulations should be about. Mr. Speaker, we have an opportunity today to direct our committees to take the first step in reining in big government, reducing our deficit, and encouraging job growth and economic prosperity. The simple bill is 3 pages long, and it shines the light on the regulatory process and provides the necessary transparency and accountability on federal agencies that have been lacking for years. My Republican colleagues and I remain committed to putting America back to work through creation of new jobs. This legislation is a way to be a part of that good start. I encourage all my colleagues to vote yes on the rule and yes on the underlying bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida.